Peace and blessings. Your brother, your friend, your dietitian back again for another installment. Books that have changed my life. This is a heavy joint. Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. So why is this book so cold? It's so cold because first off, it's less than 200 pages. It's a really thin book. It has big font, big text, and as you can see, I studied it heavily. It's highlighted. You know what I mean? I wrote all up on the sides. It's it's a deep book. You can't just flip through it. It's not leisure reading. It's heavy stuff. So first off, let's just start with the title: Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Pedagogy is education, but it's education for the adult for adults. So it's basically like the theory of education, the theory of adult education, or the theory of educating adults whom are oppressed. Okay, and just a background on Paulo Freire. He was I'm probably not saying his last name right, but he was a educator in Brazil who ended up going to Argentina and teaching, but he was teaching literacy to peasant farmers and people in the community that were being oppressed. So this book is really a classic. He cracked the concrete when he wrote this book because he really defined and classified critical education. Critical pedagogy. He basically, the inception of critical pedagogy, which is in depth, which is critical, which is thorough, which is based off of hard analysis. That's what critical means. He's like the founder. The inception of critical pedagogy or critical education started with Paulo Freire. Of course, nothing only starts with one person, but the definitive work on it is this. Why this book changed my life? I only read this book recently. I was dealing with sisters in high school. Well, actually, just one sister who was studying this and who read this. She kind of put me onto it, and she made suggestion that I should read it. And she kind of talked about the intro and the first couple of concepts in the book. But this book is really dense, I would say, and I would have to stop after reading a couple sentences. And this is a couple years ago. This isn't even like when I was in high school. This is just a couple years ago after I graduated from college. I'll have to stop after a couple sentences or a couple paragraphs, and I'll have to like digest it, get a dictionary, break it down. It's partially because it's translated. It's not even because it's translated from Portuguese. It's just a cold, deep work. So the first thing I want to talk about that really helped me and I learned from this book is the transformation of my understanding of education. Education isn't imparted, it's brought out. Paulo Freire stated that there is a system called the banking model, where it's a top-down model where we have the teacher who is seen as the all-knowing, all-powerful, most important. I'm here to give to you, and you don't have anything to offer me. It's a banking approach where there's only deposits, and the teacher just makes deposits into students, and they're just supposed to just sit there and accept it uncritically without thinking. However, Paulo Freire said that the mere imparting or transfer of information is not knowledge, or is not education. Cognition is education. The mere transfer of information is not education, but the act of cognition is education. Cognition is the process of knowing, of obtaining knowledge or understanding through thought, experience, or your senses. So cognition is different. You're engaging the student. You're allowing their experiences as peasants, as students in the hood, as students in the suburbs, as men, as women, as children with parents, children raised by their grandparents, as children who play tennis, as children who fence, as children who play street ball, whatever. You're allowing their reality to take part and be a part of the learning experience. So he taught me and changed my model of education from imparting knowledge onto someone versus getting into a relationship where you're dialoguing with the person. He called it dialogical education, where the relationship isn't top down or hierarchical, and it's not teacher and student. It's each person becomes a co-teacher and a co-student, meaning I learn from this person just as much as they learn from me. And so that was one of the main first groundbreaking kind of things that I learned, because as a teacher, as an educator, as a professional, I have to teach, but education comes from educare, which means to bring out. So if you're educating people, it's not you putting something on them or banking. It's not from the banking model, top down, where I deposit information into you. I have to investigate what you already know. We have to build off of your experiences. We have to dialogue and see what you know. It's not just me just throwing facts at you that I learned. So that really changed the game for me and helped me realize that when I come and present things to people, it has to be open. It has to be, it has to be dialogical. It has to be a conversation. It has to be symbiotic. It has to be mutual. Another thing that I really learned from Pedagogy of the Oppressed and Paulo Freire, and how it changed my life and perception, is that he talked about how oppressors are dehumanized and they're victimized just as much as oppressed people are. So in their act of dehumanizing and oppressing other people, they themselves become dehumanized. They have to become dehumanized in order to do the act of dehumanization. So that changed my kind of mentality, because I always thought from the perspective of, if somebody is oppressing someone else, there's a victim and there's an oppressor, standpoint, which is true. It's still true, but what he's just trying to say that is that they're both being victimized. They're both suffering from an unjust reality, an unjust system. And he also stated that an oppressor can't liberate themselves from that victimization, and they can't liberate the person they're oppressing as long as they're benefiting, or as long as they see themselves from the oppressor standpoint. They have to extricate themselves from that reality and stand in tandem with the oppressed to really assist the oppressed. They have to become the oppressed. They have to be one with the oppressed. It can't be like, I'm coming in as a savior, as a teacher. I just graduated from college, or I learned about critical race theory, so now I want to go and save the poor people in the community. I want to go save the poor oppressed people. No, you have to become one with the oppressed. You have to become an organic person of that. You're an organic member of that group. And so that was another jewel that he dropped in this short book. One other thing that he dropped that really changed my perception was the fact that oppression is domesticating. What is domestication? Humans can domesticate plants, we can domesticate animals, etc. So if you study the history of dogs, they started off as wolves, and over time we domesticated them and made them our friends, and eventually we would exchange shelter and food for protection, for a bond. So we had a kinship with the canine, and it would protect us from wolves and from other dangers in the environment. But we domesticated them, meaning they abided by our rules, and we kind of had an agreed upon rules, but we controlled them. We domesticated them. When you domesticate the wild bull, you get the cow. When you domesticate the wild grain, you get the domesticated wheat, and it also has less nutrients. So oppression is domesticating, meaning it controls the oppressed person, and it absorbs them into their reality. So the oppressor inculcates and transfers their philosophy into the oppressed person, to the point where the oppressed person starts to defend the reality that they're living in, the oppression that they're living in. They believe that it's normal. They begin to normalize it, and they begin to think that this reality is destined. This is where I'm supposed to be, because this is my destiny. This is fate. This is the rule of the gods. And they'll defend it, and that's why I love the movie Matrix, because Morpheus talks to Neo about it. He was saying that people who are still in the Matrix will defend it with their lives. They'll defend their own enslavement with their lives. And you have to, one has to take out the oppressor within, because really, Steve Biko said the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So you have to withdraw that oppressive ideology and philosophy from yourself in order to liberate yourself. And also the people and the masses that want to change, they have to do that themselves. And we only do that through dialogue. You don't do that through coming with the idea or slogan and you just tell them, hey, the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So change your mentality. No, you have to slowly but surely show them their reality and show them their thoughts. Like, for example, some people think that certain people, like for example, Asians are naturally smart. Whereas if you're not Asian and you're saying that, that means that you're not naturally smart. So I'm not trying to say that Asians came up with an oppressive ideology or anything like that, but I'm just using that as an example of why do you have certain ideas. You have to get people to question their reality, which leads to the next thing that I learned from Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So I already talked about the internalization of the image of the oppressor and the ideology of the oppressor, which makes people fearful of freedom, because if you have internalized and accepted the ideology of the oppressor, the ideas that have you think the oppression is so domesticating that the ideas and thoughts that you have about yourself and about your people or your condition, your class, your race, your ethnicity, whatever you want to call it, the category, subcategory, you think that those are normal thoughts. Really, those have been conditioned, those have been given to you, those have been handed to you. So you're fearful of any freedom because freedom will require responsibility and will require responsibility and action. So it would require you changing things up, and so people actually reject their own freedom and liberation in exchange for feeling comfortable with the ideas that they've been inculcated with, the ideas, the oppressive ideas about themselves. So as opposed to saying, no, you have the power, you're worthy of changing your reality, you're worthy of being something greater, they accept the ideas that they've been taught about themselves. And so that was a jewel. The next jewel that I want to talk about is critical consciousness. That's probably the backbone of the entire book. Critical consciousness is basically an in-depth understanding of the world around you and your reality. He calls it a Portuguese word, and the translator says that the Portuguese word doesn't have a good enough translation into English, and the only thing that he could use is critical consciousness. But the word, I don't speak Portuguese. Hablo español, pero no hablo portugués. So I speak Spanish, in English, but I don't speak Portuguese. So I can't pronounce the word, but it's like it's like consciousness, I think. I think that's the translation. But the author says it's a deeper meaning. But critical consciousness is basically when someone has an in-depth understanding of their reality, and then they begin to understand that their reality is a historical reality, and although it's concrete and it's real, it's not destiny, it's not fate. It can be transformed. So now that somebody has a critical, in-depth understanding of the reality, they can understand the causes of their reality. Because if you don't have critical consciousness, if you don't understand your reality on a thorough, in-depth level, you begin to think that this is just the way it is. You don't question it, and you don't understand the causes of it. In a way, you're submerged underneath your reality. He describes critical consciousness as when you're in a certain condition, you just believe this is the condition I'm in, this is how things are supposed to be. You don't even question it. You don't even see other possibilities. So you're submerged in your reality. Submerged is like underneath water. So you're underneath this thick, quicksand, and you're not realizing that there's so much abundance, so much life, so much more outside. And so when you get critical consciousness, according to Paulo Freire, he states that allows you to emerge from that reality and begin to realize the causes of the reality. So you realize why you were in that quicksand. You realize why you were so dizzy and your vision was hazy, and why you were living in poverty, or why you were oppressed in this way or that way. Whereas before you thought it was just normal. You thought that's just what you were born into, how things were supposed to be. When really now you realize, no, I can confront this reality and change it and transform it because I have the power to. I'm not a being that just accommodates and is submits to reality, but I am an actor and co-creator in my reality. And so that's what he talks about with critical consciousness. Critical consciousness is not critical consciousness without action. So he calls it praxis, and praxis is, he says reflection and praxis. So reflection is a consciousness and understanding of your reality, and then praxis is using that understanding to change your reality and alter it to create the utopia that you would like to live in. Before we can really create an idea of our utopia, our critical thinking and critical understanding allows us to see social and political contradictions. And this critical consciousness, it stems from us reading the world. And what he promoted when he was promoting literacy was not just reading the words and just leaving it at that. He promoted reading between the lines. He promoted how does this, what we read, how does this relate to, for example, how the cat, let's for example say the cat and the mouse relationship. How can we extrapolate that and apply that to our reality? What else do we see in life that mirrors the cat and the rat, or the cat and the mouse? Or if we're reading a story about someone reaching their goals, or someone trying to achieve something, how does this apply to our reality? And let's question what the roles in this story, or let's question why the mother has to act this way and the father has to be this way, or why do we do a lot of the work here on the plantation or on the farm, but the overseer or the master of or the head of the farm in Argentina or in Brazil, he gets the most money. Why is that fair? Is that balanced? And he really taught how to read the world. He calls it reading the word and reading the world, and he called it critical literacy. So not just, there's another jewel how it changed my life, because it made me question my reality and look at things like it was a puzzle, as opposed to just as a static situation that couldn't be changed. It was always like, what are the causing elements? What are the causal elements that make up this situation, and how can we make it different? Why does it have to be like this? It was always questioning. So in order for a situation to exist undisturbed, oppressive situation or oppressive status quo or reality, it has to go unquestioned. So when you just teach with the banking method, you kill off critical thought, you kill off questioning, and you kill off the imagination. So you produce a gullible population, an easily fooled, easily controlled population. So now you have a lot of people who don't ask questions, who don't think critically, who don't use their cognitive abilities, and therefore they can be swayed left and swayed right. And so he really put me on to the critical literacy, reading the world, reading social situations, media literacy, religious literacy, relationship and social literacy, looking at why are things the way they are, and are there contradictions. So that was another thing that he demonstrated on. One quote that he said was, as long as the oppressed remain unaware of the causes of their condition, they fatalistically accept their exploitation. And so that ties back into the critical consciousness. It's key to understand the causes of why you're in the situation that you're in. I remember growing up, I'm going back to Asians again. People used to always say Asians are so smart, but I would say no. Asian students study more than the average student. That's why they're quote unquote smart. They perform better because they put in the work. So it's not just accepting things as, this is just a fatalistic reality. we have to totally denounce fatalism and realize that we have the power to transform our reality. And so that's what he demonstrates here. That's what he teaches. He also talks about dividing and conquering people. So manipulating the oppressed by highlighting superficial differences and lots of other things he goes into besides just the things that I've mentioned. But those are the main I think those are the main things that I wanted to touch on. The last thing I want to touch on is how language is never neutral. Language is never neutral. So people say often the question determines the answer. So if your question is, say you're about to graduate, I just went to Penn State or University of Pennsylvania, UPenn, just graduated, and someone asks you, when are you going to get a job? The question can define your reality. Words can define your reality. So now you're thinking from the perspective of, when am I going to get a job? But if somebody asks you, what do you think you can do to provide for your needs? What do you think that you can do to provide for your own needs? What entrepreneurial things do you think you could create? Do you have any ideas that you think can generate income? Then now it defines your reality. Now you're changing your perspective. So when he said language is never neutral, basically he was saying that education can be used to oppress or it can be used to liberate. It can be used to maintain the status quo and integrate students into a system that's already set up, or it can be utilized, language can be utilized and education can be utilized to have them question that system, to challenge that reality. And those are all the things that he broke down and really explained that were really fire to me. And so it really illuminated things for me and made me realize that life is a historical reality. Yes, like racism, oppression, genocide, dehumanization. Yes, these are all realities, concrete, but they're not destined. They can all be transformed. So they can all be changed, and the power lies within you. And some other things that he really talked about were about oppressors or leaders not trying to pick up the ideologies of oppressors and trying to be like them and emulate them in their revolutionary leadership. Revolutionary leadership truly lies in becoming one with the oppressed, to become hand in hand. The greatest amongst you shall serve the least amongst you. So that's from the Bible. Jesus is saying basically the greatest amongst you will be scrubbing the feet of the weakest amongst you. He's going to be the one that's the greatest because he's serving. And that's what Paulo Freire said. So Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire, books that changed my life. This one is a heavy joint. I really recommend you cop this. It's off the chain. Inspirit Nutrition, your brother, your friend, your dietitian, back again for another installment. Peace.